All right. Welcome to another episode of New Wine Uncorked. And we're stoked because the reason why new wine is the way it is because it's real. We're real because why? Life is real. And so we're coming at you uncorked. There's been a couple of weeks where we've either had to take some time off or it's been delayed because this is life, and even today, a couple of us weren't able to with Jim and Phil, and even with the timing today. And this is the beauty because we're stoked because of the way life is, just to be able to even get on and talk about faith, life, and living. And that's what we're talking about today. And Kayla's been a regular with Uncorked, and Sarah, I think, has been on a couple of times, but it's exciting to be able to do this. Sarah is Kayla's sister-in-law. And so it's been exciting to, just as all of us come, with anything new in life, with friendships due to whatever reasons, either job or like in this situation with marriage, how we get to grow in ourselves and who we are when we embrace and take in other folks into our, realm. And that's been cool. And that's how faith is. And we're watching this play out, and it's quite interesting to see how faith is in 2022 in the midst of what we've been experiencing, COVID. Most of us in our time frame, we go through conflicts, within our own personal life, but world conflicts. This is a weird time. We're watching two countries have a war. And here we are, and so then you question, well, is this part of like maybe Americans' privilege or American elitism, where we watch all these conflicts out there, and then so we get involved by throwing money at things. But then what about here in our lives, here in America, like the conflicts that are going on, financial conflicts, the rich continue to get richer and the poor continue to get poorer. In California, where currently we all reside, believe it or not, there was a surplus of monies for the state government to help for education. Well, why was that? Which is a great thing. But why was that? Because in California, the rich got richer, so there was more tax money. So they paid more taxes. Well, hey, because they got more money, which then meant that the education has this surplus, which is a great thing. But it continues to show the differences. I mean, the dividing, gap we have between the rich and the poor, and all that, really between humans. The war going on with Ukraine and Russia, most of us, when we look at that, should say, that's what my life is. There's this battle, this war going on, whether you are a Christian or you identify with a religion. The fact is that you, me, the three of us, all of us are created by something or someone. And so we have to ask that question, well, what is me? Who am I? And today we have, obviously, we have confusion with that. Confusion in the sense of, well, we have dialogue about, well, what's your pronoun? As if that's significant compared to, who are you? I mean, yes, who you call me, he, she, they, it, that's important, but that's not nearly as important as to, but why? Why do I call you so-and-so? Because of who you are, right? And so today we want to continue this dialogue that New Wine UnCorked continues to have, is faith, life, and living. And we all are in three different places in our life, and yet we're in the same spot. We're in the same spot of trying to figure out, well, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ? Meaning that I say that my life is all about him because I've finally recognized and realized that his life was all about me, believe it or not. There's however many millions of people on the world. And when he was there on the cross, you know what he was doing? He was thinking about you, and he was thinking about me, and this is our faith. And so this is what we want to continue to talk about. And so we're excited to be doing this live because then we get to see real life, right? Exactly how we're talking about. And so with faith and life and living, what are some of the things like today that we sometimes neglect, in your views, because both of you are younger than me. So you have a little bit of life ahead of you. And yet we're in the same situations because you're both parents or parent to be, married and seeking to live out faith. So what are some of the things that you find today where we just don't take into consideration, like just how faith is great, joy, yes, happy, but man, just like Kayla and I, we were talking earlier about like love and marriage. Sometimes there's times where you're like, oh, this is tough. What are the things like for faith, living in love that come about that we just don't sometimes, oh, wow, if we just talked about this, then all of us would be like, wait, you have that struggle too, you know? So when you're thinking about faith and stuff, what is it that you go, yeah, you know what? I wish we would talk more about this, or cool, but, with living in things, especially in today's society, 2022, where we find ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Sarah and I were just talking about this a little bit. Like, how do you live out your faith in the context of where you are?
I wish we would talk more about
this. Like whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a wife, or like working, or I don't know, gonna be a grandfather. Like, how do you live out your faith on a daily basis in your own context? And I think, yeah, it is hard because life gets in the way. We live in a society that's like, go, 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 do, like, produce, consume. And it's easy to fall into that because you do have to live in the world. So you have to, pay bills and make money in order to do so. And we have to live in the world, but we have to not be of the world. And that's the hard part. That's the like conflict that we live in. The paradox that we live in is we're in the world, but we're not of it. And
Yeah.
I think like one of the aspects that Sarah and I were talking about was prayer, and how often, and I think we do this on a big scale as a church too, is we diminish the power of prayer. We just kind of set it to the side. We forget about prayer. It's like, oh, it's just prayer. Like, that's all I can do today is pray. And that should be the first thing that we're doing. That should be, something that we're constantly doing. We should be in constant dialogue with Jesus, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Like, it can just be like sending a text, like where it's like, hey God, please help, and he knows the desires of our hearts. And he, so if that's what we can manage in that moment, that's what we can manage. And, we should be doing that. I don't know why we don't. I guess we just get too busy.
Yeah, I agree, Kayla. I know we were just talking about that. So I recently started a YouTube channel, and somebody commented and was like, hey, how do I, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm busy. Like, how do I spend time with Jesus? And, I realized, like, man, I didn't even realize that this was a problem that I had also. And as I was thinking about it, like, because we are busy, that's a reality. Like, we live in a busy world. And I was thinking about it, and I think like we place way too many like expectations on what spending time with Jesus is supposed to look like. Like, it's supposed to look the same for everybody, or it's supposed to look the same every day. And like you were saying, Kayla, with prayer, it's like it could be like a 10-second, like, God, I need your help kind of deal. And so I think like we forget that we have a big God who knows our thoughts, and we have a big God who's like with us all day. And so even when we're busy, like, we can still invite him into changing diapers. Like, we can invite him into everything, anything. And so I think that's pretty cool, in the sense of like spending time with him. Because, and then when I was at your house, Kayla, and I saw your coloring book with like Bible verses, that was like a super profound moment for me, because I was sitting there and I was like, I was getting stressed out about like, okay, I need to make time for Jesus. I'm supposed to read my Bible for this long and pray for this long. And, oh, I got to worship through song too. Like, I got to cram all this in. And when I like was like, whoa, like this is awesome. And you were like, yeah, like I use that when, you know, I spend time with Jesus. I'll meditate on this verse, I'll have a quiet time. And I thought that was cool because that made me realize like, whoa, like we have spending time with Jesus looks very different for the both of us. And it actually helped me a lot because I was able to see like there really are no rules. Like it looks different for everyone every day. And so
Yeah, that's cool too, because you bring up the and I maybe you two don't even haven't ever heard of this dude named Brother Lawrence, but he's a monk, and he said basically what, I mean, he didn't say changing diapers, but he was saying during the pots and pans, when he's washing the pots and pans and he's scrubbing them, is one of the most profound times for him when he's spending time with Jesus, you know. And so what a awesome thing though to be thinking of, especially for young moms who or young dads, right, young parents who they're wondering, how can I take care of my child but then also have friends and then still spend time with Jesus? And yet what a beautiful gift to give to your child, even, is as you're cleaning their poop, you're praying over them so that the Lord's goodness will wash. Like, it's such a thing, is like you're washing away their feces, and yet it can be metaphorical, like, right, but real, because as you're praying through it, you're like inviting the Spirit in. And what a moving time. I would imagine that if parents did that more when their kids were young, you know, we talk about and child psychology, they'll talk about, as the pregnancy happens, you know, moms talking to their babies and parents getting to know their children even before they're born. And could you imagine if more parents from the Christian church actually believed in the power of prayer, that as they were even seeking to, is it the Lord's will that they have children, that they're praying through that to their bodies and to their eventual children, that how much more unity, how much more peace the Christian church would actually give to the world if it were a praying church. You know, I mean, all the times that Jesus has where there's difficulty or he needs to process what's happened, what does he do? He prays, you know. And so it's interesting how the Christian church sometimes so often points to Jesus about, oh, love your neighbor, and when we need to make this big point. But then when it comes to simple living, we neglect the fact that Jesus's every day was basked and enveloped in prayer. It takes time though. And I'm wondering if, and I don't think I would say that it's generational in the sense of the entrance of social media at such a level, like with each one of you in, you know, folks in their 20s, and your life has been social media. And yet I still think, if I look back, even with my folks who, you know, in their 60s and 70s in their high school and college, they still were busy. Their time was still all over the place, not by tweeting and Instagram, but other things, right? And so they still, though, so to say that today's culture is a little bit different in the sense it's harder to spend time with God, it's like, don't you realize that there's always been forces in the world, you know, that seek to pull us away from spending time with the Lord?
yeah, I struggle with prayer often, like, and I think because of expectations, thinking that it's supposed to look a certain way, like it always has to be this, okay, let me go in my room, close the door, let me get on my knees, you know. And so like I think these expectations are really the root of it. And you know, prayer can be hard and it can be really uncomfortable to just talk out loud or even think sometimes, and like, you know, just pray to God. It can be really weird almost and uncomfortable. And those are the times for me where I'll like write them down. Like I'll just start writing them down. Like, and then that'll kind of get me going where I'm like, okay, well, I can read this out and then I can just keep going and going. And then, you know, also like, again, like we have a big God who knows our thoughts. Like we can be in constant prayer all day long. And I just think that's really cool. And, you know, I had a friend who, you know, she had found a faith and she was like, I don't know how to pray. And you know, she had gone to like a Catholic church for a long time, so it obviously looked a lot different, and it just looked very traditional and just like was like this very formal prayer life. And I was like, dude, like, no, it does not have to be like that. And so I think that's where we can go wrong too, is thinking that it has to look a specific way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, we allow, like, I think that's one of the ways that Satan even works, he gets in our heads and he puts these expectations, or like allows us to just, make these assumptions and builds on that and allows them to fester. And then we just sit in that, anxiety of, well, is this good enough? Like, is this prayer good enough? Is it, am I loving God enough? Like, is this enough for him? Yes, it is. We are enough, right? Like, that's what he says when he steps onto the cross. He's saying, like, you're enough. I love you. You are worthy. And I think that's something that we also forget. It's too easy to get caught up in the distractions of life, whether it's social media, whether it's, oh, I have to run errands today. I have work, whatever it is. We get caught up in the distractions of life. And that's definitely something that Satan uses to pull us away from God, to distract us from the fact that, yeah, prayer can look any which way. We can be washing the dishes or changing diapers and be in prayer. But it is intentionality in that too. Like, when we say yes to Jesus, we're stepping into that and saying, okay, God, I'm going to live my life for you. And so it's being intentional with our time, regardless of how that looks. Even if we're multitasking, we can be singing praises or praying or coloring or reading the Bible, or, and doing other things as well. But it's being intentional and making that choice to do both, to sit with God in the messy, in the chaos, and say, like, hey, I want you here. Because that's, and then when we step into that, we also have to be willing to obey, because the more we pray and talk to him, the more we're stepping into that relationship, and the more he's going to push back in our life and be like, hey, this is what I want from you. This is the call I have on your life. This is, I need you to do this. I need you to call that person. I need you to go, reconcile here. I need you to forgive this person here. And so the more we press into God, the more he's going to press into us, which can be scary, because then we have to step into trusting and obeying his commands.
Well, Kayla, you bring up obey, which is interesting. I was just refreshing my memory, but obey, the Latin root is, to listen. It has the Latin root for to listen to, pay specific attention, because it's a combination obedience. And so it's interesting where I would imagine that if you talk to a lot of people and you talk to them about the problems that they have, tensions they have with others in their lives, it would come down to, if they were honest, that there was a lack of listening, in their communication. And so when people talk about their relationship with God, or like the turmoil in their lives, sometimes I wonder, but how much time? Because you could say, well, have you been listening to God? That's one thing. But in order to listen to God, what do we need to be doing? We need to be paused and actually in his presence. And so I've been talking about this thing. I've been really kind of fleshing this out for the classes that I'm preparing for fall to be teaching, is this concept of presencing. And so the philosophers talk about this, where there's a thing of, well, right now the three of us are present. Because of social media, some might argue, and I would argue too, maybe, that our presencing, where, so you have present, present, we are present in a spot, but presence with the ence is the point of you actually being with the person there in front of you. So in all three of us, because of our experience with children and parenting and things, know that as a parent, you can be present with your child, but not truly presencing, so you can be with them, but not with them, right? And that's where a lot of accidents happen, where you're talking to a young parent, you're like, how the heck weren't you in the room with them? Absolutely. You will find, and I bet Sarah, you can attest to this with Kayla and some of the things that the wisdom that you could be in the room with your child sometimes, even watching them and just not totally present. You're present, but not presencing in the situation, and they will hurt themselves. And you're actually staring at them, and this goes on unbeknownst to you. You're not even really paying attention because you're so used to the children being around and so used to them that you almost, in a sense, have these outer body experiences where you're present, but you're not really presencing, And I feel like this is what we do with God, is that we're there, or we're not really there. There's not an orientation. So when we orient ourselves, so where our trajectory, our purpose is this line, we have to be intentional. So when you bring up that obedience, Kayla, we can be in the midst of God, because it's hard not to, with a God who's all knowing and all everything, right? All present, all loving. But we can also then, while in his presence, not be presencing with him to where we are not paying attention. We're not obediently listening. And so a lot of times I think when we talk about prayer, even people don't understand the concept of prayer because they think it's just a list that they make out and they just give to God. This is what is necessary in order for me and you to be on the right page. Whereas, dude, can you imagine if we taught children right straight away from the beginning that one of the greatest things that you can do is learn to listen, and then we would be obedient to what we are called to do, that our relational aspect, the truth of who we are, allows for us to presence with one another when we truly are open to the other. And that only happens when we have space for the other so that we can listen. We have to intentionally make space. And so it's interesting with this, that there is, how we talk about love takes work. It does take work to be in relationship with one another. And yet it's the most rewarding truth. It's the most rewarding, if you want to put it in quotation marks, work that you will do in this life. But so many of us are like, I don't want to. The other person just annoys me. It's like, you're created for the other person.
Yeah, I mean, being in any relationship is hard. So why wouldn't it take work, quote unquote, to be in relationship with God, right? Like we do have to have that space. And then in our relationships too, whether it's family, whether it's friendships, whether it's, another person on the street, giving, having that space, allowing for that space to grow, for the spirit to work within us, for transformation to take place, and allowing that to happen. Because I know, like with me, it's easy for me to be like, well, I've grown, like they should see that. But it's hard to sit across from someone that you might have known or might have been close to, and now it's 2 years later and you're like, oh, well, there has been growth. Like, and being able to leave room for that, to even take the time to recognize that, that can be hard too. And so, like, and leaving that space with God, right? Like he's going to work on us, like he's going to work on our hearts if we allow him to. If we leave that space and say, God, I'm inviting you in, I'm stepping into your presence, I want to be present with you, and to allow that presencing to happen, right? For growth to happen, we have to allow that presencing. We have to be in the moment with God and say, like, hey, I'm inviting you here. I know that that's going to bring, that's going to bring persecution. That's going to bring like spiritual warfare upon my life. So I'm stepping into that and I'm allowing that space for growth in my life, for obedience, to listen to you, to see like what you have for me. And when you start saying thy will be done and living it out, that's a scary thing to step into. But then you start seeing, okay, your will is being done in my life. And it is probably one of the hardest things to do, but also the most rewarding. It's the greatest thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kayla, we were talking about this the other day, about how, we're called to be set apart for God. And I had this thought of like, okay, like not only, does this sanctification like happen for ourselves, like so that we can like feel better about ourselves on who we are now, but like it's cool because like without obedience and without obeying and trusting God and saying, yes, here I am, there really isn't that growth there. And I feel like a lot of the times, like there's not a lot of evidence. It's like, I feel like a lot of people look at Christians and they think that we're just a bunch of hypocrites. And so like, without like obedience and like loving one another and like, even just like the simple, hey, I am calling you to this, and, saying yes to that, and just allowing like Jesus to transform your heart instead of sitting there in that like, oh yeah, I believe that Jesus was a real guy, and like not actually letting him change you. Like I've heard stories of people, going to a church and be like, you guys aren't going to try and change me, are you? And it's like, but like, that's the whole point, is this change, this transformation. And like with obedience, it's cool because when, we're called to be set apart, and I had this thought of like, okay, the people who knew me back then, and this isn't me like trying to sound prideful at all, but like if they saw me now, like whether they believed in a God or not, like I feel like people would have to admit like, wow, something supernatural, like something insane had to have happened to this girl, because when I knew her, she was doing XYZ. And so I think it's cool because that happens when you're allowing that transformation, and when you're obeying, when you're saying yes, like, okay, like even when, you said like, sometimes you have to call people and reconcile relationships, and the flesh is telling you, no, like, don't do that. You don't want to do that. You're just like fighting that, but obeying, like other people are able to see that growth, and then they're able to see that that's for them too.
See, and this is the thing with, I mean, she didn't even turn off the camera, because children are a beautiful thing. They're a reminder of what life is all about, right? Because life is such that the things in front of you, while we want to organize everything, life says, no, you can't categorize, you can't organize, you can't put these in little boxes. Like life is this messiness, and what people would think is messy, like some would say, oh my gosh, you can't have a live broadcast and have a baby in the background. This is what I find interesting at churches on Sunday, is when a baby makes a noise, like everyone kind of smiles and they go, but then what do? They look and they try to find where the kid is. Why? We all know that it's a kid. Every single time they look around, you know what they do? They make that poor parent go, oh, they're all looking at me, because why? Even if they think that it's cute and they want to hear the baby looking, come on, people, we understand, because then we make it seem like they're disruptive. And that's the last thing that we should be doing in church. The one thing that I think the church misses without the little children there is their voices. Like, I just don't know how many people in this world could actually hear a little one laugh and go, did you hear this disruption of this little kid? I mean, seriously, the sermon, how can I pay attention to what this guy's doing? He's exegeting this scripture saying that we need to love, and this God is love. And that little 2-year-old is sitting there disrupting that. Like, that's where I feel like the Christian church has become. We're so blind to the presence of the Lord that we think that little children's laughter and tears and crying is disruptive. And it's such and then what does that do? It means that when Kayla comes to me and she's crying and I don't quite think that her situation, I'm like, I will discount her emotions, her feelings, her thoughts, and say, it's not really that bad. I mean, think about it. Because here's the deal, is every time that someone comes to me in my pastoral situation, I can, even when you, Kayla, or you, Sarah, come and say, hey, look, here's the situation. If I go to my pastor and say, here's the situation, you know what we can all do? Within 30 seconds, I can point out another situation that's 10 times worse than yours. And then we go, okay, so what? Does God then put levels of like suffering that has to happen before we take care of what the person in front of us? Well, that's human. And why have we done that? Because we haven't been obedient. Obedient what? Obedience is like this weird, like, it's almost like a four-letter word. You say obedient and kids are like, wait, did they just cuss? I think they said the F word. No, he didn't say the F word. He said obedient. Yeah, he said the F word. It's like this thing, because we don't want someone, when someone says you need to be obedient, what's that mean? That they're trying to control me. And we, the 2022 person has to be the master of their own domain. It's Invictus, the poetry from, I think it's George Healy, maybe, where we are masters of our fate. We are our own victors. No one can conquer this life except me. And that mentality comes into the Christian mindset, that we forget it. We forget the in Christness. I can do all things. I can do all things. We forget in Christ. I can do all things, and then, oh yeah. Blessings to Jesus, or God, right? And so I'm wondering though, for me, the reason I do that though, is try to control stuff, is because I don't like being out of control. And yet the times that I've just experienced such just beautiful growth with the Lord is when I've let go where I thought it was chaotic. And when I let go and let Jesus speak to my soul, I look into the chaos and go, oh, this is really beautiful. I don't know how I live that out faithfully every day though. How do we do that? How do we make prayer an active, ongoing dialogue with the Lord our God? How do we step peacefully into the center of this storm?
Well, I mean, I think that definitely you learn more about that with parenthood, right? Because it is a storm. You're stepping into the storm. But I was actually talking with a friend just about like birth and how you can, you want to learn and you can have a birth plan, but 9 out of 10 times it's just going to go out the window. And you have to be okay with that. You can't have yes, sure, you can learn and you can try to take control as much as possible, but you can't have control over what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. And the beautiful thing with birth is that it is life. Like, it's the miracle of life coming into this world. And so nobody, anyone that I've seen, any social media account or book or any birth course, all of them have to acknowledge something bigger is going on. Something greater than me is happening because life is being brought into this world. And there's something miraculous going on. And it is messy and it is chaotic, and you can't control it. You have to it just has to happen. And so that's definitely something that I have had to come to terms with, because I can get super anxious and be like, well, I need to make a list. I need it to look like this. I need it to be organized. I need to be able to do this or have it a certain way. And just really giving it to God and saying, God, you have created my body to be able to give birth. You have created me to be able to be a mother. And you are still preparing me for that and growing me in that. To just give that to God and say, I know you're going to be with me and you're going to be my strength and my comfort and my peace in that moment. And you're going to carry me. And then trusting in that. And I will have to continue to step into that throughout the process of labor and birth, but I'm choosing that now. I'm choosing to step into that and to give it over to him and to just let go and say, okay, God, you got me, and allow him to carry you. You can't be carried if you're kicking and fighting and screaming. I mean, have you ever just either tried to carry a child or been the child or been the parent, like trying to carry a child who's just fighting every single part of that? It doesn't work, right? Like, you're like, oh, one of us is going to get hurt here. Like and it just doesn't work. And so when we what we do that all the time to God, where he's like, I'm here, I got you. Like, I'm trying to carry you. I'm trying to take you from place, A to B. Like, just, will you please let me? We have to let him. And I think that's the hard part, is the letting go, is the letting him carry us. Because it's just in our nature, I guess, to just fight. Be like, I can do this.
Yeah, you're right. It is in our nature. I think, the Bible, it says like we're called to discipline ourselves for godliness. And I think that's a part of it too. It's like obeying is like a discipline. Praying is a discipline. Not that it's like, oh, this is like so undesirable, but it's like there are times where like we go in dry seasons, like where we're just like, man, like our faith feels dead, like where we're just like, and like in those times, I feel like that's when we have to lean in and press in the most, and like discipline ourselves to still read our Bible, or to still do whatever it looks like for us, spending time with Jesus, however that looks. And I think, because it goes against like our nature, to obey and say yes and trust, it's like a discipline almost.
Yeah, and that's an important thing, Sarah, is that faith, like love, like marriage, like friendship, takes a commitment. It's not easy. And so we have to press in, because there will be times every single day of difficulty, because it says, that we have temptations in front of us, but that the Lord doesn't allow temptations that are stronger than his love that has been poured out into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. The question that I have to ask myself every morning when I get up and look in the mirror is, do I believe what Jesus has said about me, about himself, and about you, the world? Do I truly believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and life, and that the one who is everything actually looked at me and said, Matt Farlow, you are the reason why I do what I do? And then do I take that and then look at the world and say, you are the reason why I do what I, because so often we put self first and say, well, I'll love you. I'll love you, Kayla. I'll love you, Sarah. But first, I need to make sure that I love Matt and get what Matt wants. And so then what we do is we say, well, I have to love myself, right? Because I love my neighbor as myself. Yes, but you're not going out and getting your neighbor a brand new, M30, whatever vehicle that, I'm sure there's one vehicle with an M30 or something, or I'm not getting, and it's not that we don't treat ourselves nicely, right? It's not, I think this idea of, you either are rich and you're just giving away a ton of stuff, or you're super poor and you don't have money. Like, no, most of us live in between. And so, yes, we have to take care of ourselves. We don't give all of our money away, because Jesus only told one person to get rid of your stuff. It was the rich young ruler. That's a lot of us here in America. Don't get me wrong. We are the rich young rulers, but that doesn't mean sometimes that we give everything away so that we then are the ones who need people to take care of us. If we have a ton of stuff, isn't that a time to be obedient and learn how to let go of it, so that the stuff doesn't control us? Like, Mary Shelley's of Frankenstein, or The Apprentice, where our creations then becomes our own leaders or masters, right? That's hard though. And I find, like we say, people say, well, how do you do it? Oh, pray. Yeah, Sarah, what you're saying, there's plenty of times in my life where I'm like, I don't want to be with you, Lord. I just don't want to talk to you. And what's the greatest thing for me though, are other people, Christians, people who love Jesus, who say, okay, well, that's fine. I'll be with you and I'll pray. When we do it in community, I can sit in the three of us and just be irritated and angry. But once you two start praying, this is the power of the Spirit, that if I'm sitting with you two and I'm just vehemently against the prayer, but you start praying and I'm like, okay, well, I'll stay here, guarantee the Spirit will change me in that moment. I just don't know how many Christians, how many of us, because I lack the faith to believe on a daily basis that when I let go, the Spirit is just waiting, hungry to get in with me and say, yes, Matt, let's do this together. Let's do this together. And I will show you what it means to love so much that all you do is you walk in joy, in peace, in patience, in all of that goodness, but it's when you actually have the audacity, the craziness, and are willing to risk letting go and trusting me, is what Jesus says. So many times I'm like, oh, my actions say, no, I don't trust you, Jesus. I trust me over you. And I'm like, what are we doing?
It is. It's a daily choice, like living out faith, saying yes to Jesus. It's a daily choice. Just like any relationship, right? Like when you get married, you're making that commitment to each other every single day. And that should be what our relationship with Jesus is. Like we are his bride, right?
Yeah.
So there is that marriage there, and that unconditional love. And there should be that daily commitment of like, hey, I'm saying yes to you. He already said yes to me. He said yes to me thousands of years ago. And now I'm choosing to say yes back. And saying yes means, yeah, okay, today I believe like you are enough. Jesus is enough. And, I am loved, I am worthy, and I'm going to go out and, be Jesus in this world, be the light that he calls me to be. And that's a daily choice. That is definitely a daily choice.
Yeah. What's that song? Here's My Jesus. Who sings that one? This is my Jesus. Do you remember that song, where she says,
old.
What's that?
Isn't it super old?
No. Let me show you.
Let me tell you about my Jesus.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
we just
like
need
Ann Wilson or something like that.
Yeah. Like
Tell
we
you
need,
about my Jesus.
I mean,
Yeah.
what we need is a resurgence of Keith Green, man. People need to be playing, no compromise stuff. But let me tell you about my Jesus. Like those of us who have spent time with Jesus are like, dude, I can't tell you what it's, I mean, I can tell you what it's like or what it feels like, but I can't put it into words, and I can't have you experience it through my experiences. I'll invite, but until you just, and it's so weird because people are like, I don't get it. I try. I know, but it's when you let go and stop trying and just live and say, okay, Lord, really, I know it sounds weird, but go outside and just say, show me your glory, Lord. And then seek to just allow space during the day to see the goodness of the Lord. And I guarantee that you will see it. The Lord, it's not like this God of the Christian scriptures is holding back. I mean, dude, read the accounts of what they used to do, crucifixion back in the first century. And Jesus took that and then some. I mean, so physically just in pain, this God shows what he's willing to go through, but the spiritual and the emotional suffering, if you've ever been emotionally just abused, that I would tell my class all the time, I will take physical abuse over emotional abuse, because emotional is, I mean, they're both terrible. Don't get me wrong. This is abuses needs, it's from the pit of hell, but that emotional, like the scarring when we say these words and this heaviness, Jesus took all of that. And even in the midst of that, even while I was spitting on him and smacking him in the face, and just because I was there, he says, okay, get it out, get your aggression out, because you need to give space to where you finally understand just what love is. And you can't do that when you're fighting, and it's just, we need one another though to remind, because every time I talk with folks who love Jesus, I'm reminded, oh, there is a way there, and Jesus is the truth. And this is the life that we're called into, and we're reminded daily when we spend time with people who love him, right? Fill your lives. And I think that's so important. When we're around people who are pursuing Jesus more than us, it's only beneficial, not only to my life, but it's beneficial for the world. The more that the church is willing to be obedient to the call of Christ than the call of culture, that's when peace on earth will reign, And so this is the conversation, the continued conversation. I don't know if either one of you have a parting word for our audience that they'll be like, Oh yeah, man, that's good. Whenever you're given those opportunities, no one wants to speak. They're like, I don't want to say anything. Any last
Yeah,
words though?
I have a couple questions. I mean, I was thinking
Absolutely.
too, I was thinking, like um when you don't lean in, when you don't press in, like kind of evaluate yourself. Like, okay, how kind am I when I don't spend time with Jesus? How loving am I? Um how kind am I to my strangers, neighbors, the homeless, to my kids? How gentle am I? And then like kind of thinking of also like what kind of heavenly father do we have? Like how does he love, and how can we live that out also? And just kind of like a little self eval and see.
Which so many people push against, right? No, I'm not going to evaluate myself. I'm good. I'm good. And I think that absolutely, Sarah. I think that we we as lovers of Christ, first and foremost, should look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what am I doing? How well am I loving today? And not an air of criticism or judgment on self so as to beat self up, but really to evaluate, like, the more I love and the gentler I am, then what that means is that I'm giving more and more space to the Spirit to transform my heart, so that that love that's poured out by the Holy Spirit can then be poured out into the lives of those around us. And I think it's so important, and I totally appreciate that. And as we continue for the weekend, going into the weekend, the rest of the week, let us think on that. Pray about that. For those, maybe you're struggling and you're not sure who Jesus is. Maybe you're 50 years into this, or 2 days into this, or 20 weeks into this. The fact is that we have to all assess, okay, well, who do I say Jesus is? And when I do that, then I can come back to what Sarah is saying, is look and reflect on self and say, how am I doing? Am I spending time with Jesus? And if I'm not, then like, look at the things around, look at the way I treat others, think of others, talk to others. The closer I am, like, really to do as an assessment when I'm really, and it's not to pat ourselves on the back of, look at how great I'm reading the Bible, I'm praying all this. No, it's to actually go, life is just better this way. It was created this way. Surprising. We're going to continue this conversation each week. We do this Fridays, 10 to 11 on YouTube. So just catch us. And sometimes like this week and last week, they're different in the sense of, but around that time, 10 o'clock time. And the way that though, is if you just go right on over. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, and you just go right on over to the upper part right there, and underneath the video should say a subscribe. And once you do that, then you go to the right there, and there's this nice little bell. Once you click the bell, guess what? That's a notification, so that anytime that we go live on YouTube, you will be notified. And then go on over to the Facebook, for those of you that still do Facebook, and subscribe to or like the New Wineskins page. And then finally, if you're not about Facebook, you're not about Twitter, you're not about Instagram, you're just all about the internet, go to new-wineskins.org. And that's our homepage, our website page. I'll put that up in the description right below the video. That way you can figure out, well, how do I participate? Maybe I want to be obedient, and I want to accept that invitation that the Lord gives to each one of us to participate with him in this ongoing drama of salvation that's playing out for all of us, right? The Lord wants to work with us and together with us, and he wants to be wowed, believe it or not. He sits there and says, I can't wait for you to wow me with your imaginative ways of loving. That's how much he loves us, is he gives us choice, because we are created to be pro-choice and pro-life, believe it or not. We are created to be all, because we have the choice to choose to live. And so this day, do you choose to live? And how so? The greatest way to live is by loving the other in front of you. And so we're so stoked that you joined us today. And again, look for Fridays on YouTube. But you can go back and watch any of the other videos, the archive videos, because they're all up there on the YouTube page. And then you can send us questions. That's why with the website, there's a place to contact us with those questions and asking those questions of, how do I do this? Because then we can get back to you. And that's one of the ways to participate. And so we're stoked that you joined us for this Friday, the last Friday of April, believe it or not, in 2022. Whoo, crazy. So enjoy the day, live the crap out of today. And the best way to live the day is to love. Love is the answer, believe it or not. And so on behalf of Sarah and Kayla and all those watching and stuff, we're stoked that you joined us. Have an awesome rest of the day and a beautiful weekend. And come back and join us next week. And so once again, this is New Wine Uncorked, and we'll see you on the flip side. Have a good one.